Okay, you ready?
At any time.
All right, I'm gonna call the June 2024 meeting of the Lacey Planning Commission to order. Roll call, everybody is here. Karen is supposed to be calling in, she's not in yet. And Tanya and Elliot are out.
Judy,
And Judy, yes.
Elliot's here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Eddie,
But
I
I'm
meant
here.
Eddie.
Yeah.
Ease. All right, Gail, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
Sure. We, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral lands of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian tribe and the Squaxin Indian tribe, Island tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people who not recognized today, who were absorbed or relocated to other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and the descendants that are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek and their, as the traditional stewards of these lands from time immemorial. Their role today in my eyes are terrible, in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the stories of dispossession and forced removal and abridgment of treaty rights that allowed our nation, our state and our city to develop as they have today. We recommend that the community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll be looking at either a motion to approve the agenda or a motion to amend.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and approved, or moved and seconded to approve the agenda tonight. All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. And then looking at the minutes, I'd be looking for a motion on that.
Move to approve as written.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the May 22nd minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and it doesn't look like we have any members of the public for public comment.
We do have attendees online, and so while there's nobody in City Hall, there is folks online. This is your opportunity to address the Planning Commission. If you want to do that, go ahead and use your raise hand function of the webinar and we'll go ahead and bring you in. You'll need to introduce yourself and leave your comments, limit your comments to about 3 minutes. So anybody that would like to make public comment, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll bring you in. Going once, going twice. I don't see that we have any public comment tonight.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, any commission members reports? Yeah, Daphne?
It's a little bit of a comment and a little bit of a question, if I could. I read in the paper about Olympia with another hotel for homelessness and such, which is great. But it's a little anecdotal, but it's just an inquiry on the one that's in Lacey. Just situations I've noticed, and then we just recently heard from one of the local businesses about some troubles they've been having since it opened. Personally, we had a vehicle almost broken into. We ate at Taco Time and witnessed somebody acting crazy on drugs and police interaction. And then we talked to the local gas station and they indicated they are forced to have somebody in their parking lot overnight to manage the situation since that's occurred. And so I know, I remember when we first talked about it, and I understand this isn't a decision for the Planning Commission so much, but I remember when we talked about it, it did help even if there is police activity, it is at least centralized and things like that. But is there any follow-up on how that situation is going, what crime is looking like? Is it helping? Is it containing? Has there been any follow-up on such?
Yeah, so let's see what I can give in terms of some background. When Maple Court has been open now for almost a year, so it's almost a year to the day. there was some initial problems with people moving in. I think since then it's settled down. And so some of the ongoing issues that we've been seeing are, and I'll also kind of talk about some of the things we're doing to address it, but really doesn't necessarily center around many of the residents. It often centers around the people that are associated with the residents. So as an example, Maple Court doesn't allow for visitors on the site. And so what that does is people that are, you know, around, that are associated with the people, they tend to loiter around Maple Court, which creates its own set of issues. Talking to the police department and the fire department both, they are, I'll say, fairly, calls for service are fairly stable. There's not an inordinate amount of calls to the facility there. In fact, some of the data actually shows that it's much more stable now than it was when it was a Days Inn, when it was a hotel. As far as some of the business outreach goes, there is every month there's a meeting. It's called the Community Advisory Group that is stood up to basically Maple Court hosts that. It's the venue to be able to provide information to businesses, for businesses to be able to participate in those kinds of things. So we've been holding those meetings monthly, and at this point, other than a few businesses that have come and gone, we really don't have any business interests that are participating in those meetings. In fact, what we've heard is that especially the corporate businesses are advised not to attend by their legal staff and other management. So really, as a result, what we've been doing is Prince Booker, who is the manager of Maple Court, has been doing business walks with Wesley Nguyen, our economic development coordinator. And that has really been effective. So we're doing regular business walks to all the businesses in the area, having face-to-face conversations with people and kind of addressing any concerns that can be addressed right then and there. We've also been kind of doing some other, through the police department, some focus enforcement around some of the theft and those kinds of things around Maple Court. So I know that recently we did a enforcement at Walmart, Home Depot, Costco, I think, and this was in the last week or two. And it was discovered at that point that they did arrest one client of Maple Court at that point. That it's infrequent and fairly rare that those people that are arrested are associated with Maple Court. So I just wanted to kind of make that, even though somebody was arrested from Maple Court, it's not like that's happening regularly. A lot of times it's other people from other areas of the community or even outside of the community. So there's a lot of issues with proximity to I-5, easy on and easy off, that creates some opportunities for people to do shoplifting and stuff like that. So hopefully that gives you some background. I don't know if that's exactly what you were looking for or not, but.
No, that's super helpful, and I appreciate the distinction between the residents and maybe others coming to visit or, just hang out there or something. I think it was just, we heard something this last weekend about broken windows and having to have essentially all 24-hour security, and that just wanted to follow through on it. So that's perfect. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to build on that topic if I could.
Yes, and I want to welcome Judy and Kieran. They showed up.
Oh,
Okay.
great. You mentioned that this is the 1 year of that being in place, and it was meant as a transition place, right, for them to be able to step into more independent living.
Mhm.
Do we know what the success rate is of them transitioning out to independent?
I don't know off the top of my head how many clients have been permanently housed. It's not a large number. It's a relatively small number. Jennifer, do you know?
Last I heard from Prince was 7.
7?
Okay.
But the long-term plans for Maple Court are to transition Maple Court to permanent supportive housing. And so, that is the timeline with that was 2 to 5 years from the date that it started. So now that's a year to 4 years out. And so Maple Court will eventually transition into permanent supportive housing and would have kind of different rules and regulations associated with it than what, you know, the enhanced shelter that it is today. So we lack a major gap in our community as far as people from shelter need permanent supportive housing, but there's not that permanent supportive housing available. So hopefully this will help fill some of that gap. So yeah, you know, at this point, there's not a huge success rate. The idea was to get people out of the right of way and then transition Maple Court into permanent supportive housing. And so, you know, hopefully that will also address some of the other issues with it being, you know, a shelter right now, is that it has a different clientele and different rules and regulations than it may if it's, you know, long-term housing for people that are more stable than those that are in a shelter situation.
Thank you.
So in relationship to planning commission, you know, we have to, we're supposed to be looking for the future as these homeless camps grow. We're trying to transition them out of homeless to something like Maple Court. We can only expect those to grow with people as the economy gets worse. So we're seeing all the problems that arise from that community. It's a little hard to plan for something. How do we look at what the future holds for trying to eliminate homelessness? You know, because it's only a growing and growing problem because they flock to the support system in the first place, enabling.
So, and this might be a little bit of a roundabout answer, so let me know if I don't answer your question, but I think that, you know, we have to think about what the planning commission's role in, you know, in the city's process is. And number one, that's, you know, recommending, goals and policies and regulations to the city council to address things like affordable housing, like encampments and that kind of thing. The other is to make sure that within our plans, we have planned for housing for all segments of our population. And so that includes not only, you know, housing at the market rate, but at the very bottom of the scale as well. And so we need to make sure, and this will be part of our housing work that we have coming up, is to show that we have enough housing opportunities for all segments of our population based on their income. And so those are a couple things. Just a little bit of history, if and I don't know if anybody's still on the planning commission that was involved in this, but the planning commission did. So part of what the planning commission can do is recommend rules and regulations around homeless encampments, sanctioned homeless encampments, emergency housing facilities to the city council. And the planning commission did that. That was about a 1.5-year process. Daphne, were you involved in that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was.
On left, Eddie probably is.
Yeah, Eddie was too, because he's
Yeah.
longer than me.
So that took about a year to go through a process where we looked at rules and regulations around sanctioned homeless encampments, safe parking areas for things like cars and RVs, for actually like homeless shelters and where those can go in the community, you know, how long they can stay there, occupation requirements or, you know, those kinds of things. And those recommendations were forwarded to the city council, and the city council has not done anything with those. So what happened was there was a formulation of a advisory group of about 30 people to kind of address homelessness kind of as the city COVID happened, and that kind of didn't get stood up, or it didn't get completed. It got stood up, but it wasn't completed. And so at this point, you know, it's still kind of on the future work program of the city council to address what the recommendations were of that committee, and then also address the rules and regulations that were assembled by the planning commission and recommended at that point. So planning commission's role is, like I said, it's goals and policies, it's rules and regulations and those kinds of things. And planning commission in the past has done a significant amount of work. But at this point, you know, that those recommendations haven't been brought into our city regulations.
It was very intentional work, I thought, very detailed, great support from city staff, but it was good detailed work, a lot of public hearings, a lot of public input, a lot of information, so we understood the issues more fully and such, so it felt very comprehensive to me.
Yeah, we had a planning commission, a hearing, I think, that with people out in the lobby, if I remember right, that
Yeah.
night.
It was full, it was full, but it was good work, I thought.
So I'm gathering that was 5 or 6, maybe more years ago when that took place.
Yeah, probably
It was
pre-COVID.
It was pre-COVID,
Yeah.
so would that information still hold true? Would those recommendations still be salient with the changing conditions since then?
Yeah, I think they were very well developed.
Is
You
there
know,
somewhere we could get a copy of that?
absolutely, yeah, I can email everybody out a copy of the regulations as they were recommended by the planning commission, and you could all take a look at that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you want to reply back by email, or, you know, we can even talk about it at the next planning commission meeting if you'd like.
Okay, great. Good.
I can see how it would increase our viewership too.
Yeah.
We're looking for ratings.
Pretty soon, if that's what's going on.
All right. Any department report tonight?
Yeah, I have one item. So the council has set up an ad hoc committee related to parks funding or parks improvement funding. And so the council is basically establishing an advisory body that is going to advise them on, let me give you, I'll open the email here. So reviewing parks expansion and replacement projects identified in the Parks Capital Improvement Program, analyzing available funding options, recommending a funding package, including sources and amounts and the prioritized list of parks projects to the council. And then the work group will hold approximately 8 meetings over 6 months in the rest of this year with some additional time commitments. The reason I bring it to you is that they are looking to establish this committee relatively soon. It would be a work group of up to 13 members. And of those 13 members, 6 spaces would be made up of non-voting ex officio members. And those members would come from our existing city advisory boards like the Planning Commission. And so at this point, what I'll do is I will forward this email to you that kind of sets out the and that information about the advisory board. If you'd like to participate, let me know, or, you know, if you want, you can just raise your hand now. If you're interested in it, it is I'll say a fairly significant time commitment with that number of meetings. So that will be on top of planning commission meetings as well. And it's gonna be this summer into, you know, the early part of next, or into the fall. So, maybe what I'll do is, if I don't hear from you right now, I'll just forward this on to you, and then if anybody that wants to participate, just go ahead and let me know.
I could possibly be interested, but the time commitment is a concern, so I'll
Yeah.
look at your email when you send it.
Depends on the meeting days.
Yeah, meeting days for me as well.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll send you the email, take a look at your schedule, see if that's something that you're comfortable in doing and available to commit your time to, and then let me know, and I'll pass that on to our park staff, and they'll take it from there.
Okay, great.
I'm
That's
assuming
that's
some sort of
actually kind
selection process, they're gonna pick. who to
Yeah,
choose.
exactly. So it's, yeah, if you're, it's not, yeah, exactly. There's a council subcommittee of 3 of the council members that's actually establishing what the group is made of. So just because you volunteer doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be on it. Chances are, being a planning commission member, you have a pretty good shot at it. And since they're asking for some volunteers from our advisory boards, I think, you know, if you did volunteer, chances are you'd be selected.
Are they looking at some of the youth council for?
Yes, yeah, youth council, the difficulty with the youth council is right now, a lot of them are seniors, and so, you know, they're out of school, so that may be some limited. There's also on the Parks Board, there is a youth representative on the Parks Board as well, so.
Great. It's awesome. I know when I was in city council, looking for funding for some of those things was always a
Yeah, it's
challenge.
really-
So having a targeted group can only help. Great. Okay, now I am going to suspend our regular meeting and open a public hearing for the 6-year transportation improvement plan. And that is going to be presented by Martin Hoppy, the transportation manager. So take it away, Martin.
Thank you. Tonight we're here to talk about the 2025 6-year transportation improvement program, what we'd like to call the TIP. And just to let you know, I caught it that the heading on the summary was the wrong year. And it has been fixed. I like to think of the TIP as kind of like a check register for grants that we get. That's really what it has become. We do track state and federal funds, regionally significant projects that TRPC has determined. And the way they determine it now is that if they can put it in the model. So intersections wouldn't count. It's mainly big capacity projects that we're talking about here. And it is also the foundation of our traffic mitigation list. At some point, every project that we collect mitigation for has been on the tip. And it has to be consistent with the transportation comprehensive plan. And those are the real requirements. I know I said it last year, but this year is absolutely the easiest tip we've ever done because I didn't even change a project. I just increased it for inflation by 1 year. The College Street Corridor Phase 3, which is basically from Lacey Boulevard to 22nd Avenue. That section with the roundabout at 16th. We've been applying for raise grants for the last 3 years. They're supposed to announce it June 27th, if we got it or not. If not, we got 2 more years to keep applying. Every year, the debriefs have gone well and we get more points every time. So hopefully we got a winner this time. And that's really all I have. Be open to any questions.
Spencer?
So there's a separate improvement line here, 11021, that says College Street Corridor improvements. Is that for the whole project scope for all the phases?
Yes.
This is just that one line item?
Yes.
Okay.
We originally put it in when we did the original College Street Corridor study as a total project. And that's kind of what I've been doing over the years anyway, is I've been trying to get it as big a project as possible and then we piecemeal it. Cause we have no ability to go out and do a $50 million project on our own.
Yeah.
But if it's listed as there, kind of like Marvin Road is one that is what Britton Parkway to Columbia. We've slowly been picking off little projects here and there. So that way it only takes me a month to add it to the tip instead of 3 months. So I'm all about time lately.
So a couple things, if I could just add a little context. Number one, this is for the new plan commission members, this is an annual requirement required by WashDOT, by the state DOT, that we complete this exercise. So for us here in Lacey, this is reviewed by the planning commission, hold the public hearing, and then the recommendation is made to the council, and the council makes the final, basically, approval of it. The other thing I'll just note is under the STIP ID is that those are the years the projects were kind of put on the tip, correct?
Yeah.
So you'll see a lot of 2011. So these have been on, our transportation improvement plan for a long time. The newer ones are this latest phase of the College Street Corridor. And then, the newest one is 4 years old at this point, the Willamette Drive and Campus Glen Drive.
Actually, I made a mistake on that one. There was a grant round that came up in 2020, and I put it as a 2020 project because I didn't think we'd have any chance. So other people had to give up their money for us to get this project, and somehow we got it. I have no idea what happened. So we got the design money. So once you get obligated in the STIP, it has to stay that same number forever.
Okay.
So we put it in 2014 when the school opened, Salish Middle School.
So that's at the intersection of the Meridian Market, the future Meridian Market, right? Yeah.
So from Yelm Highway, does this stop at Pacific or does it go all the way up to 15th? The College Street Corridor.
Oh, the College Street Corridor is from Lacey Boulevard to 37th
Okay.
on the corridor study. Yeah, the College Northeast Extension is one we got the grant probably 4 or 5 years ago.
You would know.
I have no concept of time anymore. But yeah, we're getting really close to going to add on that one. Got 3 more properties to buy, the cultural resource report, and then we're going to. And that's a good example, because once we get the original grant, it has to come off the list, so it hangs around for a while and you have no way of finding, I gotta go back all the way and go, which year did we do that?
But did I understand correctly that you said that you can't adjust the price based on after you receive the grant? So you can't change it to match current construction costs?
Correct.
So if we're receiving grants for projects that are 10+ years old, aren't we gonna be woefully underfunding those and then have to make up with it during the capital improvement, or am I misunderstanding this?
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking for phase 3 is an example. I am going to apply for this grant round. We got some money. Shannon got another $850,000 from the Strickland earmark. There's 2 more grants. I put it in. Let me go back for a second. Redistributed funds is something new. That's how we got the Willamette funding for design. And it seems like it's been getting higher and higher every year. So I'm kind of counting on that. So I already put it in. And once you have a project there, you're higher on the priority list for getting money from other states. Because we typically always meet our obligation goal. And for states that don't, the feds say, okay, you're not gonna spend it by the end of the year. We got a state that will. Now, the property improvements that we do, originally, when we redid College Street, some of the homeowners were pretty upset that we took their land and then also reassessed their property value for capital improvements. Is that something that will happen again along College? We will have to buy some right away. There were some people that weren't very happy about it, a lot. Yeah, I didn't think so. They're making good money on that. From my thought process, there's that little house, between 18th, just a little bit south of 18th, it has his driveway on it. I talked with it because we were getting ready to buy it and the appraiser came up with like $180,000 and I talked to the couple that bought it and they just said, oh, we just bought it for $99,000.
Yeah, the city council didn't receive a lot of negative comments on that.
I had 2 clients that I did work on there to improve the property because when they hacked through their property, they really didn't redo the landscaping or anything like that.
What
They were
we typically
upset.
do is pay the property owners to redo their landscaping.
Mm.
Makes sense.
We don't usually do it.
You're not in the
Yeah,
landscape
that makes
business,
good
yeah.
sense.
Okay. Yeah, whereas they had a nice big yard before.
Yeah, so I'm personally in that boat there. I have several hundred feet of frontage on College Street and a lot of very mature landscaping that can't be replaced or transplanted. It basically has to get bulldozed, and I know several of my neighbors in the same situation are pretty concerned about that. And what I told them is that this was approved a very long time ago and it's gonna happen and we can only work within those bounds, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't some discontent amongst the homeowners on that street. Because one of the big thing that I've heard from everybody I've spoken with is that our doorsteps are already 20 or 30 feet, if we're lucky, from the road. And if you pull it in another 10 feet, I've responded to car crashes across the street where it's literally in their living room because there is no barrier from the road. And so there are some safety concerns that I've heard from citizens. Again, all up and down, and like from 22nd to 27th is where I'm at. So that's where my focus is at. So, I'm curious about how the city is planning to widen those roads, make them pedestrian friendly and create some sort of safety barrier. And I don't know if that's a planning commission issue. I don't think so, but I'd be curious to explore that more in depth later.
I think it's more of a council issue, really.
That's what I would have
You know,
figured,
the
yeah.
yards along College there are the way they are from the original widening back in 1970. You and I talked about that the other day.
That's when this happened. They had new assessments against their property for the road improvements to take away their land. So they weren't real happy about it.
Well, the LID when they did at Telco Loop area.
This was like 22nd, along 22nd, et cetera, college.
Sewer.
Yeah, I don't. That had to be back.
It was back, yeah, it was 1980s, yeah.
Yeah, when they did that originally, I remember that. Okay, so thank you, Martin. Is there anybody on the public that would like to make public comment during this hearing?
So we have a couple of members of the public in attendance. If you'd like to make comment on the transportation improvement plan for the public hearing, go ahead and raise your hand and we can bring you in. Go ahead and raise your hand and we can bring you in, going once. Not seeing anybody going twice. Safe to say at this point, you can close the public hearing.
All right, I am going to close the public hearing. Thank you, Martin, and I'm gonna re-engage the regular meeting. So we are at a point in the meeting where we have new business.
On that, we just are recommending the planning commission make a recommendation
Oh,
forwarding this.
Oh, okay, okay. So that, what we would be looking for is a recommendation to be forwarded to city council regarding the transportation improvement plan. I'd be looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Martin.
Good to see you again.
You too.
As old as I am.
What you mean?
All right, any new business? Okay, old business. Let's have Jennifer talk to us about mental housing.
It's really good to see everybody tonight.
It's good to see you.
I'm loving your colors over here.
You
You
did.
guys kind of match.
Do we?
It's a little distracting.
Yeah.
Take them seriously.
The ideas are still good.
Perfect for
Thank you, Sarah.
this gorgeous day that we're having. So anyways, thank you. Really great to be back. I know it's been a minute. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
So I think it was February or so when I was here giving kind of a high level overview of some of the middle housing work that we're doing on our planning staff is doing. And that will, of course, just to recap, be a couple of years before we get to the final end goal of adopting a middle housing ordinance for the city. So lots of work to do. We're still on the front end of phases, but step one got paid, so yay, we're happy about that. Been working for a couple of months here on this next phase, and so tonight I just wanted to bring you guys up to speed on some of that work. And then I think hopefully included in the materials that you got, if you're interested, you can check out kind of the summary of my work. Though the work itself, I keep secretly stored in a spreadsheet. And if you can't get to sleep at night, give me a jingle and I'll send it your way for sure. So let's see. So we covered that. So this phase of the work, phase two, really the main objective here was to look through documents, mainly the city's comprehensive plan and all of the elements of that plan. And then any documents that we have developed that support some of our housing agendas. So I'll get to that here in just a moment, but the lens on this was really to focus with the objective to look for indicators where policies, strategies, narratives either show support for the inclusion of middle housing, or perhaps they in some way may pose a challenge. to furthering both the state mandates and then also our local, community vision for where we want, how we want to address our housing needs, for now and in the future as well. So do keep in mind that this process was specific only to middle housing. And while there is a lot of overlap with some of the housing initiatives that are out there right now, the lens did remain really narrowly focused. So middle housing is really, really what we were looking at here in this process. And then also, this was an exercise to inform, but none of the work that I have done binds us to anything final. So just keep that in mind as we kind of work through and just kind of show you the process that we've been up to. So would you mind slide 2, Ryan?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
sure.
you gave it to me.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
I
great.
can drive.
Oh, I don't mind.
Okay. There you go.
Thanks, Ryan. All right. So let's just do a little bit of a recap here and recall a few pieces of state legislation that serve as the guiding documents for this middle housing initiative and set forth the requirements that the city needs to meet. So the first one there again was House Bill 1110. That's kind of what we perceive as the main bill. And that refers to minimum development densities in residential zones. So overall, this bill aims to increase housing development opportunities and variety in areas currently and predominantly comprised of single-family homes. It also seeks to loosen development constraints that traditionally have hindered alternative housing types such as triplexes, fourplexes, and so on. And then the second piece of legislation, House Bill 1337, focuses on accessory dwelling units. So this bill introduces new requirements for ADU inclusion by mandating that at least 2 ADUs per lot will be permissible in all of the GMA growth areas. And then also that ADUs will no longer require owner occupancy of either the primary residence or the ADU itself. So that'll be hopefully a welcome change. In addition, the bill expanded the size limit to 1,000 square feet and calls for limited application of design standards. And then the third piece of legislation. This was more recently passed, just a few months back. And it just added a few amendments to House Bill 1110 regarding mainly critical areas. So essentially, this bill limits middle housing exemptions on properties with critical areas to only that portion of a lot or parcel that is impacted by critical areas or their buffers. And then there was a little bit of new clarification about major transit areas, but that really won't apply to Lacey because we don't by definition have a major transit area. So we probably won't be very much impacted by the third piece of legislation. Okay, slide 3. Where's, oh, just click. Yay, okay. Oh boy, that gets small up there. I'm sorry about that, guys. Okay, so slide 3. So let's revisit really quickly the proposed timeline for the work that was presented at our last meeting. So again, phase 1 out the door and we got reimbursed, so that was great. So this has been phase 2. And again, that's been the initial review, or I'll use that term interchangeably, probably with analysis. So initial analysis, comprehensive plan. This will be due this Friday, actually the 14th. So getting ready to package that up with a bow and get that sent on its way. And then we talked about you having a summary available to you if you so choose to look at that. Oh, and one other point I wanted to make is to also remember that, or to know that this was internal staff review only. So none of this work is intended for public consumption. So there weren't any additional requirements other than us to do and prove that we have thoughtfully done the work. So that's hopefully what will come forth, when this is all delivered to Commerce. Okay, so it was helpful as I went through documents to keep in mind a guiding question for myself. And so I identified that question as simply, does current policy support middle housing development? So this was helpful, assisted the process to review the city documents for compliance, as well as to identify barriers and opportunities, and then make suggestions for things such as language updates, modifications, or omissions. And then also just to really gain a great understanding of what the city has already done or is doing, that shows, you know, good support and for the implementation of middle housing, which, as you probably all know, we have started to become more successful with, you know, implementing duplexes and triplexes in some areas of the city. And let's see, moving on. Ooh, look at that stack of documents that I went through. So what documents were reviewed during this internal staff analysis? Again, that was the comprehensive plan and all of its elements, the city's affordable housing strategy, and then also the city's housing action plan. And all of those were very rich with context for our housing policies. And then in addition, a very, very high level review was included of the county-wide planning policies. And that was really just to simply look for consistency between the county and the city and how those sort of merge together to show regional support for how are we gonna do this, right, as a region. And then, you know, importance of analysis. So why do we do this kind of work? And simply put, analysis of existing guiding documents really is critical so that we can ensure legal compliance, we can promote housing diversity, facilitate sustainable growth, enhance community resilience, and then also it was a provision of receiving these grant funds. So we, at the end of the day, don't have a choice for we don't get to cherry pick the work. Let's see, so methodology, how was the work approached? So I've, really had a great support through the Department of Commerce so far in this process, which is really exciting to report back. And so I've stayed in great contact and had some individual meetings with the team there and got some guidance on selecting what would be an appropriate typology to apply to this process and make it a little bit easier to work through all these documents, and then also just make things more consistent as I worked through documents. It was very helpful to clarify concepts and categories, identify gaps and opportunities, support consistent decision-making, and then encourage communication and engagement for these types of conversations. And if you're like me, I had to just stop for a second and go back to high school and say, what the heck is a typology? So just an overview on that really quick. Wait, did I get ahead of myself? No, I didn't. I'm so sorry. So four categories were chosen to help assess the Polygy strategies and narratives. These were selected as supportive, approaching, challenging, or not applicable. So supportive, pretty simply, is the policy valid and supportive to achieve the GMA goals for middle housing? Approaching was more, the policy, how it's written now, can help achieve the GMA goals for middle housing, but there may be room for it to become more efficient or more effective. And then challenging, the policy does, or it may present future challenges to being able to achieve the goals, and then not applicable would just be more so that the policy itself does not really have an adverse impact on achieving goals for middle housing. And so let's take a look at a few examples of how this was applied. So in more cases than not, what I found was that goals, policies, and strategies, as well as the narrative, kind of crossed over and fell into multiple of the categories. So this might be an example of one of those. And this is goal one, straight out of the housing element of the comprehensive plan. So have sufficient number of single family dwelling units, multifamily units, and group and special needs housing to provide a selection of rental and home ownership and affordable housing opportunities for all persons. And so this one was scored as supportive, approaching, and also perhaps challenging. And since you guys are not asleep yet, and I've got your attention, I will give you a couple more examples here. I love babies that want more information, you know, I just scoop them up and get them prepared right now. Okay, so here, let's take a look at a couple more, right, from the housing element again. Goal 1, Policy A, provide opportunities for development of all housing types to accommodate future needs for each type of housing. So that seemed fairly supportive and pretty simple there. Goal 1, Policy B, monitor the market and available land in the urban growth boundary to provide sufficient area zoned to meet the demand of various housing types. And that also I found to be fairly supportive. And then Goal 2, Policy A, another example of where some things may overlap, says consider requirements and incentives designed to result in a balanced increased supply of affordable housing in all parts of the city for very low and moderate income households. And that one there I saw as supportive and then also approaching. And so you might be saying, well, that is all great, Jennifer, but what the heck does it show? So if we dig just a little bit deeper, the next step seemed logical to apply a rationale, right? So here's what I was thinking and here's why. So going back to, for example, the examples I just showed you. So that first one, Goal 1, Policy A, rationale applied there that was found supportive is policy strongly supports middle housing by expressing provisions to provide opportunities for all housing types. And it does not adversely impact middle housing inclusion. So therefore, policy was supportive. And then the next one, Goal 1, Policy B, this policy strongly supports middle housing with the commitment to monitor market conditions and available land in the UGB to meet housing demand for various types of housing. And there again, the policy does not adversely impact the implementation of middle housing. And then the next one that had some overlap there, Goal 2, Policy A, the rationale there was policy may be seen as supportive for middle housing, as middle housing can achieve housing for moderate income earners and in some cases may assist in providing affordable housing units when conditions are met per House Bill 1110 and incentives are offered. Policy does not adversely impact middle housing inclusion, though could have opportunity to be enhanced. And so maybe an example of that could be something like, and then I would make a recommendation that says consideration could be given to adding language that refers to middle housing. For example, we could just change that a bit. And sorry, I have a dot here, but it could read, consider requirements and incentives designed to result in a balanced increased supply of affordable housing, parentheses, including middle housing varieties in all parts of the city. So very simple modification there can bring that into, just enhance that a little bit more. And then you've heard me say the term narrative tonight. And that's important because most of our city's guiding documents are very, very rich with narrative. Or maybe we see that as the story of how and why we do what we do and have come to the conclusions and the junctures that we have today. And they paint a picture that includes the historical context of our city and the ways in which we as a community envision a path for the future that sustains Lacey as a desirable place to live, work, and play. So this text here is from the introduction of our comprehensive plan. And I'll just read that to you here. So original text says, while single-family neighborhoods have remained a staple in Lacey, the number and variety of multifamily housing choices have slowly increased in the last several years, including in mixed-use developments. The comprehensive plan calls for distribution of a range of housing types to provide for the housing needs of Lacey's full demographic profile. The plan also proposes the use of compact mixed-use housing forms to provide conservation of buildable land resources and opportunity for a range of housing styles and choices. So this sounds really good. And really, this is not something that would have to change. It reads well. It doesn't adversely impact middle housing, but there again, the scanning and the process of this was to look for areas where we might apply something that could enhance and bring in that middle housing piece. So a recommendation for that could look like something, or could look something like this. By just changing around a few things and adding some words. So while single family neighborhoods have traditionally remained a staple in Lakeland's housing landscape, the number and variety of multifamily housing choices, including middle housing options such as duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes, have slowly increased in recent years. The comprehensive plan calls for distribution of a range of housing types to provide for the housing needs of Lacey's full demographic profile. The plan also advocates for the use of compact mixed use and middle housing forms to conserve buildable land resources and provide opportunities for a variety of housing styles and choices. So just another way to really say the same thing, but include some of that middle housing language. So that's me at the end of the day. So the purpose, again, the overarching sort of purpose of this type of work, as I've mentioned already, is, and it doesn't hurt to reiterate, that it helps us to prepare for new middle housing regulations. It helps to inform next process steps and also to inform the work of the comprehensive plan update, which, as you all know, is concurrently running alongside of this middle housing work. And then let's not forget, it was required. And so therefore we did what we were expected to do. And so next steps, we'll be moving right along into phase 3. Phase 3 is going to get a lot more in depth and be a much lengthier process than this one was. So phase 3 is going to be where we start to really look into our code language. That's going to be a process of more than uno. So, you know, we'll be looking at a lot of these things as a larger body on the planning staff, as well as I'm sure our building staff as well. So a lot to anticipate coming up. And then we'll continue with our public outreach and engagement opportunities. And then we'll plan to come back and revisit you guys as soon as we have some more findings and some, you know, anything of substance to bring you and things that we may need recommendations on at some point here in the future. So I think that that's all that I have for you this evening. I really appreciate your time. And if there are any questions, myself and Ryan are here, so.
We'll go Elliot, Spencer, and then down.
Okay.
Okay, so.
I've been watching you jumping around.
So when all this first started, it was, we're going to give you bonuses and incentives and all kinds of things to build the middle housing within your developments, which had moderate success, not a lot, but a little bit of success. And then we went from that to, you will do this. And we don't care whether it's your land or your development, your company, or what even works for you financially. How do we help these developers take this down without gagging?
So one thing I'll mention, so you're right, the state has kind of stepped in and said, you know, you must allow for these types of housing types in typically single family residential neighborhoods. They're not making people build them per se. They're saying that the city can't prohibit them, that they're you know, they're required to be allowed, if that makes any sense. So we're not, you know, we're not putting a gun to somebody's head. And
this is saying you will not unless you do this.
So, yeah, I mean, what we're saying is we can't prohibit it. So, you know, but we're not saying you must build this only. We're saying in addition to single family, you can also build duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, et cetera.
That was the old model. The new model is you will do this, isn't it?
No.
Isn't it a requirement of code by now?
The requirement of code is that we have to allow for it. We're not requiring people build it.
Has it been historically prohibited? Is that why it?
It's been left,
switched?
correct.
has,
It's
yes.
been
Yeah.
left up to the authority of the city to decide how it wanted to handle middle housing options, if at all. And so what the state did was it stepped in and said, you can't prohibit it. Now you must allow it. You have to go through this process to do it. And so it's a little bit, this is kind of an interesting process because part of it is like, well, it's required, but yet we have to take it through a kind of a typical planning process at the same time. It would be easier if the state said, you have to require it, and here's the regulations, and it's just state law, right? But what they're saying is that the cities have to do it, and then also you have to put it into your comprehensive plan and your city code. And so this first step that Jennifer is providing the information on is kind of analyzing our existing plans and policies that says does this apply now? And if not, what changes do we have to make? And then what we'll do is we'll take this information as we develop our comprehensive plan and fold this into the next iteration of our comp plan. Again, it's required, so we have to do it, but, you're right, that's the next step and the next kind of involvement of the state. And in my perspective, it would be a heck of a lot easier if they just said, this is the state law and
Well, that's what they did in New Zealand and they literally stopped all building. But,
Yeah.
But they did,
my second, I'm sorry.
they did something similar with the manufactured housing.
Yeah.
25 years ago.
Right.
Because cities were basically zoning manufactured homes out of their, and they came in and they said, nope, you have to allow a HUD certified home anywhere you allow a stick-built home.
that's right.
Right.
Yeah, very
So it's
similar.
not that you have to
You
build
will allow it.
or erect manufactured housing, you just have to allow it.
I think that you have a really, really good point, and I think one other layer in the conversation that can seem hard to justify is that other housing requirements, such as like our housing allocations, are saying, okay, cities, you do need to provide X amount of housing to meet all income levels. And so I think at the root of the conversation is, do single family homes today meet all of the income levels? And I think most of us can agree that no, they don't. And so the idea and the concept in really trying to open up middle housing varieties more is so that those objectives can have an avenue to be met, right? Because I think in theory, the theory is that if we have some housing stock that is built at a smaller scale, that a smaller scale may be affordable. Now, is it more affordable for a developer to build? I don't know. I need to spend more time with, stakeholders like yourself and, kind of understand that larger picture. But I think you're right that, these will also be things that we'll be talking about as we move forward, is what types of incentives can there be, should there be, what's reasonable, who pays for them, all of those things. And so it may be very true that this would really have to be highly incentivized, to have something sound attractive enough to build.
Yeah.
So
So you had one more.
Well, I also had a question as far as, we're seeing a lot of extension of existing HOAs,
yes,
How does that, and within those HOAs, they have rules, okay, you have to have, say, half an acre, or it could be 2 acres to build with, 3,000 square feet at minimum. In my HOA, it's 1,600 square feet. Do these rules supersede the HOAs?
they don't. HOAs will still supersede these.
Okay, even on an extension of an existing.
So
HOA.
this is where the state legislature has also stepped in and said that the old covenants that apply still apply, and they supersede the city's rules. But any new subdivisions can't preclude middle housing options. So if somebody came in today or, after the legislation is in effect, comes in and wants to do a subdivision, puts covenants on the property that says single family only, they can't do that. The state has said you must allow in your
I'm talking about
covenants.
like, there's a plot of land next to an existing HOA, and then they wanna be a part of that HOA within that plot of land.
So
temporary, you know,
they wouldn't be able to,
Example,
regardless of however that's done, any expansion or extension or new HOAs would have to comply with the state law, so they may not be able to, you know, preclude any.
so they would have to put a mental housing on these 5 acre lots amongst these $1 million.
They wouldn't have to,
Have to.
they would be, they couldn't preclude it. So it would be an option. Typically, you know, somebody that's building that isn't going to be building that. They're gonna be, you know, we don't have 2 or 5 acre subdivisions in Lacey. Maybe that's a rural Thurston County kind of concept, more likely.
As we expand, which we could only, you can expect the city to expand into the rural areas.
Right, but you know, for a developer, they're gonna build as much as they can, right? So they're gonna wanna, you know, subdivide those properties to make as much profit as possible. They're gonna use a building type that's going to generate as much profit as possible. So likely, they're not gonna put like a duplex on a 5 acre lot.
Okay, Spencer, then Daphne, Kieran, I see your hand, you'll be after Daphne.
Mine's very quick. I presume you have a counterpart at the county that's doing similar work in terms of like the updating their codes to reflect HB 1110.
So
Do you know?
And
the thing about the HB 1110 is that it applies to the cities, so it doesn't necessarily apply. So we've been working with our kind of regionally with our city partners on housing allocations and this kind of stuff, but not necessarily this specifically doesn't apply to Thurston County. So
but there's no conflict there between county regulations and what the cities are now mandated to allow?
yeah, there certainly could be.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious about that and if that work is being done at the county level as well, cause I've heard a lot of complaints from people about how the county can be really challenging to work with on a lot of those land use issues.
Right.
So I was just curious as for my edification.
Yeah, so really this is only something that applies to the city limits at this point. So we're working with our other, you know, partner jurisdictions. You know, we are working regionally on things like housing allocations because, you know, as, you know, we want to make sure we can accommodate all segments of the population everywhere. We're having to kind of shift where some of those population allocations are set. So what I'm getting at is taking population from the rural area, because they're not going to be building duplexes and fourplexes in rural Thurston County. Really, those are going to be in the city limits. So it's shifting more of the population burden onto the cities, which means we have to provide the option of these housing types to be able to meet our population allocations.
So mainly just a little bit of, I guess, comment and or food for thought or something. Great examples, the wording choices, and it made me look at some of the comprehensive plan statements may be potentially overly broad and try to incorporate too many ideas into a singular thought or sentence, which made it challenging for you to say if it was or not truly supportive of middle housing. So I don't know, just as for authoring the comprehensive plan, like that one paragraph that like it could have meant a million different things relative to housing and maybe it's overly simplified. So just a thought. And then the ad for middle housing, what concerns me, and I understand your purpose, you know, you've got, we're mandated to do this, we need to make sure it's in there. But I wonder if we put things like such as middle housing, are we giving the apparent emphasizing that over, say, affordable housing or other kinds of things? By using those, and I know those were just examples that you provided, but I wonder, do we need to also put in other examples of other types of housing, namely affordable housing, because it appears that we're emphasizing middle housing over other housing types. And we don't want to lose the affordability piece, which is obviously a significant goal for us. So totally get where you're coming from and what your scope was relative to that, but that
Yeah, for
just-
sure. And I actually think that that I'm actually thinking a lot like you, because there were a lot of other examples through everything that I've been going through where the emphasis has been on single family housing. And so my comments were the same as what I'm hearing you say now. You know, the emphasis here is really on single family housing. How do we pull that in? So I think what I'm hearing from you is to just make sure that we're inclusive of all of the things, all of the housing types. And so I appreciate that comment very much. Yeah, thank you.
I wanna clarify something Ryan said too about, so the middle housing law did not apply outside of the cities, but the ADU language did, so that's everywhere.
Thank you for clarifying.
Karen?
Hi, thank you. I was curious as I was reading through the language that's changed around the ADUs. Seeing with some of the older, larger lots, there could be up to 4 ADUs, and it's saying potentially allowing for the separate sale of ADUs as well as revising the off-street parking, so potentially removing off-street parking. So I'm curious if perhaps 4 ADUs are on a lot, but there's no off-street parking. How can the city address, the narrow streets and the older neighborhoods that do have those older lots, or how would that look in some of the neighborhoods as we're building these, different styles of housing to provide that extra, the extra units that we need?
Good question. I think if I remember right, it's 2 ADUs. Is that correct?
It said 4 units.
4 units. So so it could be a duplex with 2 ADUs. I guess that's probably,
Right.
what it could be. So contact your state legislator if you've got concerns about parking in your neighborhood, because what they've said is that we, again, kind of like the middle housing thing, the ADU amendments are mandates as well. And so they said, regardless of if you've got enough parking or narrow streets or those kinds of things, the city can only do so much to require certain things. And so generally what that means is that we'll have more ADUs that will probably be larger because the maximum square footage allowance is going up. And they will have less parking overall. And then finally, they also will have an option to be able to be sold individually through what's called a unit lot subdivision. Basically, from my thinking, it's kind of like a condominium. So basically where you have kind of like a common space, outside, but you actually own your own unit. That's kind of the concept there, so that they can actually be bought and sold, and so they're not only just rented or you allow your parent to stay there rent free or whatever. They're actually able to be purchased. So much like the middle housing thing, the state has said you must do these things, and so unfortunately for us, our hands are a little bit tied on things like parking and streets and those kinds of things. And unfortunately too, a lot of these will go in the older neighborhoods where we may lack sidewalks and infrastructure, because that's where the larger lots are. The smaller homes are that are kind of in the middle of those larger lots. And so it remains to be seen, but I think, Karen, I think you're onto something, and I know what your concerns are about, this impacting some of those older neighborhoods and some of those things that go along with that. So totally understand that. We'll try to do the best we can as we work through the code on how we can best address that. But again, this is something that the state has said, again, I would have just, rather it just been made state law than having us have to put this into our code, but they've basically said that this is what we're required to do. So as we get to it, we'll get you, the planning commission will have the draft code to review, and we'll make sure to put in the draft when we get there, what our purview is and what we can't kind of deviate from, so that you're clear on that.
Well, and it was about 10 years ago or so, the city council did look at parking requirements. We actually relaxed a lot of them on the theory that a developer that's looking at doing a project, instead of mandating that they have to have so many spaces per square foot, which the development community was bitching because, oh my God, it's adding so much cost to building and stuff. So the reasoning was, the developer's gonna provide what they believe to be adequate parking to attract investment in their project. And rather than the city saying, you must, let them decide what they need to get their return on investment.
I'll also say, related to all these types of mandates that we're getting now, is that it's not because of cities like Lacey. Lacey, has had, I'll say, very, like you're seeing it in our goals and policies, very, accommodating policies related to things like middle housing and ADUs, including our regulations. There are certain communities around the state, a lot of them are suburban King County cities that have basically said, nope, we're just gonna be single family only, and we're gonna shut the gates and leave everybody out. And so that's when,
That's exactly what came to
They're the same ones that don't have alternate watering days.
yeah, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So keep that in mind, that even though we're lumped into this together, we are not necessarily the bad actors that we're trying to be addressed, but now we have to, adjust our codes, go through this process to, make this consistent across the board around the state.
Elliot?
And, well, I'm with Kieran on this, I was a developer at one time, I would look at this and go, oh, Old Town Lacey, all those big lots, I can go in there, buy a house, wipe it out, put in 4 units, hoo-hoo.
Yeah.
Do we really want that kind of war going on amongst Old Town Lacey?
That actually happened
It
in
has
the
happened,
older
yeah.
town Lacey.
Yeah,
Over there, Olery Street, Lacey Street and all that. That actually happened a few years ago.
we're gonna have some pretty angry neighbors. I mean, what kind of safeguards do we have in that? If we don't, then let me know, cause I'll get some buddies.
Again, there's not a lot. What another planning exercise that we're going through is a displacement study that's also a requirement of the state that we do. And our consultant, we actually met with them last week and toured areas of Lacey where there is some risk from people being displaced. Based on if a property was to redevelop or something like that. And the 2 areas we took them to, number 1 were some manufactured home parks. And number 2 were this area that we're talking about, kind of south of kind of downtown Lacey Golf Club, between, kind of like 14th down to 22nd, between College and Ruddle, and it showed them that, as a result of some of the middle housing options here, we could see some displacement of more kind of affordable older units that, people could, get
It's
moved out
also an
of.
older population that living in there.
Yes.
Much
Well,
older
that's why I said there'll be a
population.
maelstrom,
Yeah, and there were, on the corner of Golf Club and 14th, there were, I think, 2 or 3 houses that came down and then they built, I think, 2 4-plex units there.
Those homes first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Housing Authority, Housing
Are-
Authority.
Yeah.
nice looking, actually. They've improved that neighborhood a lot. Yeah.
And we showed them that. We showed
Yeah,
them on that
that's
tour.
a
We
really
stopped and
good project, I
we looked
think.
at that. So.
And that was low income. or
Yeah, homes
limited
first
income.
is
Yeah,
low
homes
So,
first,
so,
yeah.
so going back, are we not going to try to protect some of these old heritage areas like Old Town Lacey?
We need to be aware that there's some displacement risks as a result of this and be able to address them somehow. I don't have a final answer for that because part of this is that we're also required to allow for these middle housing options, which could displace, an older single family house with somebody older living in it. And so we need to, I don't have any answers for that right now, but we just need to be aware that that's a possibility and
Well, that's kind of our job.
Well, we
City
also gotta
planning.
realize, we also gotta realize, allowing this doesn't mean you're gonna have 25 or 50 projects that are gonna happen in 5 years.
If once they see boom like that in one area, we will be.
You
will have
could.
to-
Only if it's profitable.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of
Which
rental
exactly
properties
right
in
would
there
be,
too. They're
right.
not all homeowners.
Well, and you do, the alternative is you do have a single family unit having one house versus 4 people being able to have some sort of middle housing, some sort of affordable housing. And so, while it is, for the one family may be displaced and figure out, but it does, could allow for 4 people to have something, 4 families to have something affordable, which is, I think, what we need to try to look
I
for as a
would be
state.
upset if my family's had a home for 30 years, my parents are there, and then all of a sudden now they've got pop, fourplexes all the way around them of Section 8, et cetera.
It may or may not be that, though.
Yeah.
One thing I was gonna just reiterate too in the conversation is that we don't wanna confuse middle housing with affordable housing. So they're not synonymous. But there's an opportunity, if done in a certain way, there's an opportunity that middle housing could be deemed more affordable to certain income groups. And or for example, a fourplex, if a developer desired to put up a fourplex, that would be a middle housing project. The fourth unit or one of the 4 units would then have to meet state definition of affordable. So you would have 1 unit within the 4 that, yes, would be, you know, at the affordable rate,
And,
whatever that is with
Is
the
that double
AMI.
talk?
Yes.
Okay, thank
and,
you.
and the counterpoint is, I would rather have somebody go in on one of those single family lots, add 3 ADUs, which are defined living units. Because another law that got passed this year is no, you cannot limit the number of non-family members that live in a dwelling anymore.
Yeah, and that's
So
why they're.
I would rather have
It's a
those
scary
defined living
regulation.
units rather than having 8 or 10 people living in a single family.
I grew up in San Francisco, and you got 5, 6 families in
Yes.
one apartment.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
so,
But now you have all those houses that are rented out to, 8 guys from the base who are never all
Right,
at the same
right.
time, but they're all parking their cars on the street.
all right, Jennifer, thank you very much.
Thank you for the engaging
We look
conversation
forward to
and
more.
you betcha.
Thank
All
you.
right,
All
good to
right.
see you again.
You bet. Good to see you
So
guys as
can I
well.
propose that we dedicate a meeting to, because we are the city planning, I think that we should try to retain a heritage of certain areas.
You can't. That's what the legislature told us.
More discussion to come.
Yes,
Can
yes.
we schedule a meeting for that? We can have a discussion and make a recommendation?
Do you-
Yeah, so
Can,
Legislation be damned until we get new ones?
can I tell you who your legislators are that you need to talk to?
No. I've already heard them.
Lindsay, you're gonna talk to us about climate sustainability.
Yes, I am. I feel like I just saw you all very recently.
It's nice to see you.
So, but it's good to see you all again. Here, Ryan. Yeah, so just a few updates on all of the climate sustainability stuff we have going on at the city, some initiatives, some money that we're getting from Commerce, and then a short update on the home energy score model ordinance that the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative is putting together, which will go to stakeholder engagement starting at the end of this month and into July. And I'm thinking, when I get to that, we can talk about it a little bit. We might just need to put together another meeting, planning commission, just a topic on the home energy score model ordinance. When that should come, I can talk with Ryan, or maybe we'll have some thoughts about before stakeholder engagement, after stakeholder engagement, and things like that. But we have taken the model ordinance to the cost, but before I jump ahead, so we did get SilSmart designated, a silver designation. And so we got that back in April. So we got all of our requirements done. We got our designation. We have our webpage up. And yeah, so it's kind of one easier action we can get completed for the Thurston climate mitigation plan. It's a specific action called out. And so we were able to get that designation. And then, so the regional initiative for the 2024 stakeholder engagement, so stakeholder engagement is to begin in July. The residential home electrification campaign, it's on there. It's a long thing. Internally, we're calling it E3. It hasn't been labeled that yet, but it's just less of a mouthful. Along with the home energy score model ordinance, we've taken note, we put together a policy memo that lays out staff recommendations for a home energy score model ordinance. And we've gotten preliminary feedback from the Climate Advisory Work Group, which is part of the collaborative, which is citizens and community members. That there's about 15 of them that sit on that. And we were able to take our recommendations to them, get their feedback, and put that into the policy memo. And so we're full force getting these initiatives planned this year for implementation starting in 2025. We do have a mostly completed greenhouse gas inventory. We're still waiting for the finalized report from ICLEI. And then we will have the 2022 greenhouse gas emissions. Why is it 2022? These things take a long time to get data. And so typically greenhouse gas inventories are about 2 years behind. And so we started the process early this year, but it takes about a year and 6 months to get full completed data. Because there's also a database that we pulled national data from. And so getting that, especially with like rail cars and transportation, and there was some new, I think there was some new numbers getting figured out this year as well. Like, so there's new emissions being factored, what's not getting factored. And so, but yeah, so we'll have that very soon for the public and for you all to look at as well. I will say, spoiler, they did go up slightly. But that was to be expected because when we took a hit in 2020, we all know that a lot of people weren't driving for a very long time, right? That we were working from home. And so we were kind of anticipating that, but there's also some slight new calculations that don't so we get better at collecting data all the time. And sometimes that factors into why we have slight increases as well, which is the case this year too. But overall, we're going down. Our greenhouse emissions overall are going down. And in that, I think next year we're gonna do a wedge analysis. And so if you don't know what a wedge analysis is, it's taking everything that the state's doing, everything that's happening at the federal level, everything that we're doing locally and regionally, and it puts it into this wedge. So it would be like, here are proposed actions. Here is what we're gonna need to happen to get to our goals, right? So that's the wedge part that we're talking about. And so we're gonna do an updated one. And I think that's gonna get us a lot closer to our goals because the state has been doing a lot the last 3 years in terms of climate. We have too, but the state is a big part, right? Because greenhouse gas emissions are really hard to quantify the smaller you get down. You have to look at them more broadly sometimes. So Solarize will end in July. We've been a partner on this campaign. We've shared some information on our webpage. We've shared information on our social media. And we just put the last Lacey Live, we put some information in the Solarize campaign. And if you're not familiar, Solarize is ran through Olympia Community Solar. It's a group purchasing program that you can get lower cost solar panels put on your home. Because they work with a contractor to get a lower price than what you would just go out getting bids for. And that's all of Thurston County, Mason County, and I think another county they've expanded to. So since the program has started, this is the Lacey Matching Rebate Program. It ended May 15th because we ran out of funds because it was so utilized. At the end, I think we were spending around $10,000 a week on matching rebates. And that really could have been 3 or 4 projects, but if we're matching projects at $4,000 for like electrification, you know, those add up very quickly. And so total we've spent around $194,000 and that all comes from the climate implementation budget, which is in the general fund as well. So that's not grant money, that's just the money that the city of Lacey has spent on the matching rebate program. And I'm still waiting for the last numbers. There's a couple of more invoices coming in. Folks didn't have to submit their application by the 15th. The work just needed to be done. And so I anticipate maybe by the end of this month, we'll have all of that closed out and be able to really know what was the most that we rebated, you know, which projects were really heavy on. Although it'll probably be furnace and heat pumps for the most amount of money. And probably clothes dryers for the most, and smart thermostats, because they're an easier one for folks to get sometimes. Yeah.
We also submitted for a Governor's Smart Communities
We did,
Award
yes,
for
thank you
that.
for reminding me.
So
Yeah.
hopefully we get some state recognition. It is a fairly unique program, and so, you know, in a model, I think in your presentation, you have the HERE funding.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So we're gonna keep this program going. It'll change a little bit, but I think the state has kind of looked at what we've done as a little bit of a model for what we're doing. So
Yeah.
the state is actually getting into the matching rebate game as well. That
Yep.
Lindsay will go in here in a little bit.
Yeah, and it was actually really exciting. I said on a call 2 weeks ago on a Friday when we were talking about how it was like South County and then King County, or South Counties and then King County, talking about how we're gonna use the HERE funding, and Pierce County has already been talking with PSC about adopting a matching rebate program based on what we've been doing. So it's really cool to hear other jurisdictions recognize this as like a way to get their residents money, and not have to create a new program. So it's really cool to kind of lead the way in that. And I'm excited for the HERE funding as well. I hope we get to restart this. But the home energy score model ordinance, so we've made some pretty significant advancements in terms of the regional initiatives. We have, like I said, a policy memo which includes research, so background into all of the major cities that have home energy score model ordinances within the country, which includes like Portland, I think Austin, Texas, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Pulling those together, best practices, and then going through each of the steps of model ordinance, what we'll need to work through with stakeholders and with the jurisdictions, and then making some recommendations. And then we've received preliminary guidance and actually approval from the CAW. So we just asked them, we went through each of the recommendations and we got their consensus vote on if they'd like to move it forward or if they'd like staff to change it or if they see any issues with it. And I think all of our recommendations ended up going through with a ton of discussion, which was really great. We got to change some of the stuff in that. And then, so some of that includes, so staff recommendations, and this is what I'm talking about, maybe at a future meeting, we should come back and go through each of these. It's a lot. So when we're talking about home energy score, there are all these different options that we can utilize to kind of tailor it. And so some of the recommendations will fall into asset rating tool options. So there's like a home energy score, which bases the assets of your home, which are the insulation, windows, doors, appliances that you have in the home, heating types, and even wiring sometimes. And then there's the operational data. So those are kind of like how you use energy in your home. And so really we want a tool that uses asset data and not operational data, because that can vary vastly depending on who is occupying the home at the time. It doesn't tell us a lot about the home itself, but more about the occupants of the home. If we'd like to use the home energy score energy performance program, which DOE runs, or if there's a new one called HERS, which they do like blower door tests, but it's much more costly and really is designed for new construction. And so a lot of our housing stock within Lacey and even just the region is fairly old. I mean, we're talking like the most percentage is like 1960s, 1980s, and so a HERS score really wouldn't tell us a lot about older homes, but just new construction, and they're at least double the cost of a home energy score. Trigger events, and so if a home energy score would be triggered at the time of sale of a home or at time of listing, everything we've gotten back, especially from like realtors in the area as well, has always pushed for time of listing, because it won't hold up the selling of a home on the back end, and that's their biggest concern is, getting to the table and then a sale falling through because they don't have a home energy score. Compliance options, there's voluntary and there's mandatory compliance options. Obviously, mandatory compliance are gonna have much more, are gonna have higher rates of success in terms of both how many home energy scores are getting done, building out the workforce, and also getting energy work done in the home, energy efficiency work done in the home. Because if we're looking at this as a tool to get homes more energy efficient, unless folks have the knowledge of what needs to get done and then connected to the programs where we're offering them money, offering them services, then then you're gonna have a lower rate of that work actually getting done. And then applicability and exemptions. There's some exemptions if your home, so we can like add on stuff like if your home is currently not LEED certified, because LEED has some, it's not super great in terms of, but there's some other like green certified. So if your home is already rated to a certain standard, you wouldn't necessarily have to get a home energy score to sell your home, right? Or if it's like a distressed sale, obviously we don't want to hold up anything that's gonna require distressed sales to like be even harder on the families that are having to sell their homes or the people having to sell their homes. And then also low income subsidies. So versus just not having low income homes or low income folks do a home energy score, because obviously their homes matter and we want their homes to be rated and they can use this as a tool as well. It would be offering subsidies or just fully subsidizing a percentage of low income home energy scores every year. And then we walked through, oh yeah, I love the question.
Who is doing this work? Is it done by PSC? Is this done by municipal organizations?
Yeah, PSC right now does have
They've
a
had something like
program
that for a
that you can
while.
come in. I don't think it's not a home energy score where you don't like all of your assets get rated and you get all of that because you would have to be a partner of Department of Energy's home energy score program in order to get access to that. But they do offer and actually one of our staff team had PSC come and do one just to like for our own research as well. And it's really heavy on just the rebates that PSC offers. And obviously there's all kinds of stuff that you can get. And so we're looking at a home energy score. So like through all of the jurisdictions and connecting them with that way. And then the work itself is done by a lot of, how it usually happens, I think, is home inspectors have the easiest path to getting their credentials to be a home energy score assessor. Since they already have all the other credentials, they can just take a short course and then they can be certified through like DOE to do that. And so they would be doing the work. In terms of compliance, if we mandated it, we've been looking at some options. Obviously, we wouldn't want to track. The cities and jurisdictions would have to do compliance themselves because we all assess fees differently. But in terms of tracking what homes are getting listed versus do they have a home energy score, that can be done by a third party or a contracted partner through DOE. And there's like 4 or 5 companies that are contracted partners with DOE. And so it would be split. Yeah.
So the climate action team used to do some of that. Are they not doing that anymore?
TCAT is who you're talking, yeah. So they originally did the stakeholder engagement around this, but no, the jurisdictions have really taken this up and are because we're the ones that have to get a model ordinance through their council, get a program started, how we're gonna pay for this and keep it going long-term as well. Yep, and so yeah, so the next steps, we'll have about 6 or 7 stakeholder engagement groups throughout July, probably into August, which will include realtors, first-time home buyers, inspectors, building groups, just to get their feedback on what we're gonna have, like a proposed model ordinance, how they see what, like any issues with this, issues they see, how they'd like to see it roll out, and things like that. And so, and then also include low-income housing providers. So there are a couple of, so we talk about low-income subsidies as well. I'm blanking on the name. Habitat for Humanity is actually getting people certified right now to do home energy scores. And so they'll be able to offer them to no cost. And then also actually Olympia Community Solar is looking at getting 3 to 4 of their staff certified in home energy scores as well. So so we'd have them at the table as well, right? Talking to them about how they see this working.
Even though you mentioned stakeholder engagement surveys, a lot of those stakeholders have already been at the table.
Yeah.
They're already
Yeah.
talking, already
I've
well
had a
aware
few
that-
conversations with Kim, who's a realtor, and sits on our call, and just about how this would work with the MLS, you know, having, and just all these stuff that we have to work through. And yeah, so lots of conversations are ongoing and, I think in the end we'll get there and I think we will be able to adopt it. It's just, yeah, I think we'll get there. I think it's just gonna take a lot of conversations. And a lot of stuff to figure out, including program on the back end, right? This is a model ordinance, but how are we gonna actually implement this program? Comprehensive plan updates. So we are finalizing our scope of work with Rami Associates. I always forget how to say it. They're based out of California, but they've been doing a lot of comprehensive work and updates down in California and in Hawaii. And we went through a whole process and we're really excited to bring them on to do our climate resiliency sub-element of the comprehensive plan. And so, yeah, when we kick off with MIG, we're gonna bring them in as well and start getting the, you know, the public engagement portion going. And yep, we've been awarded $350,000 to do this work, the climate resiliency sub-element through Commerce. And so we have all of the scope of work lined out with that and as soon as we get them on board, we'll start, being able to build commerce and get deliverables to them. HERE funding, so we've been awarded $477,555 in a really arbitrary way. I have no idea how this got figured out.
29 cents?
Yeah, I know. And what's really interesting is Tumwater got the same amount of it as us. Thurston County got like $8,000 less, and Olympia got like 481,000. And it was like a formula grant, but we have no idea, like, we're just very unsure how this, yeah. And then actually Ellensburg got like $4 million, and yeah, I know, and I have like, I wanna talk to them and talk about, like, ask how they
Punch
got.
that grant writer.
Yeah, I think what it is they don't just do stuff for Ellensburg, they do stuff for their surrounding area as well, and so I think they just got more
They
money.
brought them donuts.
Yeah, they definitely did, drop off some coffee.
Probably be.
We're currently completing our project plan, which will go with the scope of work to Commerce. But we've had discussions internally and with Rick, and so I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna use it to restart the matching rebate program. But because it's tied to grant funds this time, it'll probably be a little bit more restrictive. So HERE funding has to be used for low to moderate income folks. But the Commerce actually guidelines is like, I think up to 150% of AMI. But PSC uses 90% AMI for their efficiency boost. So we're within those bounds. And so most likely what will happen is conversations with PSC will happen for residential areas. It's very specific equipment too, so we can only rebate heat pumps, some wiring on the electrical panel, and then heat pump dryers, which I did not know were a thing until this grant funding came out, and heat pump water heaters. And so those are like kind of the 4 categories. But then what's really exciting is that we're hopefully going to be able to expand this to small businesses with 50 or fewer employees, and then also multifamily units. And so we're working with PSC right now on how we can revamp the program probably in September. Yes.
So is that actual area median income? So because Lacey is in the 40,000 for AMI, so that means if you're making 36, you qualify as a single individual? Cause that's not gonna be most of the population that lives here, so that seems like it's not
Yeah.
well targeted. Or is it area family median income? Because
That's a good question.
that's doubled.
I'm not
It's been that
sure. I
close.
know it's not as restrictive because it doesn't, because it also goes up to 150% of AMI. Ryan might be looking it up.
Yeah.
And so that's actually a really good question. I'm not sure. Because I know the efficiency boost for PSC, a 90% AMI, it actually covers a lot of folks. So I kind of feel like that's like area of family median
Okay.
income.
That would make a lot more
yeah,
sense to use
yeah.
that metric.
You said 2 things that really triggered me. It was
Hmm.
trigger events and mandates.
Oh, home energy score. Yeah,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
who's paying for this? The private sector, the homeowner?
the homeowner is gonna
By
pay for home
required-
energy score. Yes.
As part of.
It's
selling
about
property.
right now, they're sitting at about $125 for a home energy
So
score.
that's a jackboot way of slamming something down somebody's throat that doesn't want it.
A
Because
home
then-
energy score?
Right,
So you're saying
Yeah,
the seller has to include that in their information package?
Yes, or yeah, they would have to include it in their information package if it's mandatory, right? There's a voluntary option. If we're mandating it at the time of listing, they would have to include a home energy score.
so who determines the mandation?
The jurisdictions do, if they want to mandate it or not. And then if you're mandating something, then comes, do we offer incentives to do it, or do we offer fines if you don't do it? And so,
It's disgusting.
and actually the most effective way to do it is through fines and mandating it, otherwise folks just don't volunteer. Well, what you get is folks who are on the higher end of incomes will do a home energy score. And therefore their homes are more attractive for selling because they have this information as well. But then what you get is low to moderate income families
That's
or
a
homeowners that
discrimination
don't
then.
do it.
Mhm.
If it's voluntary, right?
We're talking mandate.
If it's mandated, everyone has to do it.
But
And
it's a
then
harder
we would
hit.
offer,
It's a harder hit to someone
Sure.
selling
Especially if they're.
Well, it's a hard hit.
And
to
and
something.
there are ways to do it where like the homeowner doesn't have to pay for it themselves. You can do it out of the proceeds from the sale. You can do it out of, you don't have to.
Still losing it.
Well, you're still-
Yeah, for a home
Sure,
you're not gonna
sure.
own.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think we're talking about residential energy use is our highest greenhouse gas emissions in our region. And so if we really want to tackle home energy use, our housing stock, then how are we going to get information to people about their homes and also connect them with services that includes rebate money? So we're offering them money to get these upgrades done. Otherwise, we're gonna continue to have high energy use in residential areas.
So I've got the efficiency boost question answer here, but I just wanted to mention, I think part of it, and Lindsay's getting to this, is that there is a hidden cost associated with the energy bill that you pay every month that you don't know what that is until you take over a house.
Mhm.
And this is very similar to a disclosure process that you go through for anything else associated with your home, like has it been damaged, has it flooded, et
Yep.
cetera. It's also disclosing essentially what the energy cost is associated with that house. Because if it's let's say it's a, older home, it could have, leaky windows, those kinds of things that come with a, $500 a month energy bill every month. Well, that's gonna affect the affordability of that house long term. And so, the idea is that then you give the people the resources to be able to replace those things and update those things so that overall, that energy load is reduced. Those will then pay themselves off in the long term. And so that's the idea with the program. I mean, there may be philosophical opposition to doing
Sure.
that.
Very much so.
But it is at this point, being floated as kind of an idea to address
Mhm.
the region's biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions, which is its homes, and be able to address some of these things when they sell rather than people doing them kind of voluntarily or people
Right.
falling into a house that all of a sudden they can't pay, the bill on.
Well,
Right.
first off, the rebates are not a complete cost rebate. So in other words, it's like a $600 towards your $4,000 extra expense that you're trying to, and some people sell their houses because they simply can't afford them anymore. As their economy goes worse, and they're trying to maximize whatever they can get out of the house.
Yeah.
So when you're talking $30,000 for a new system, in fact, I just had a customer and paid $21,000 for his, it was a variable Mitsubishi system. So the rebate was, I think, $800. So what we're basically doing is saying, we're the government, we're here to help.
We're happy to have you.
And that is not a help, that is a hindrance for homeowners.
I have a comment too. If we're talking about this score being revealed at the time of sale and that the seller has to pay for it, that's not something that's going to incentivize them to do all that work before they sell the house. It's going to be a charge that shows up like on your HUD-1 statement at the end. Oh, 125 for this and 130 for that. All those things that show up. What it'll do is reveal to the buyer things that they have to do.
Exactly.
Deficiencies, like you talked about, Ryan, but when they're coming in to buy a house, very few people come in with this extra allowance to say
Oh, right.
they're
Mhm.
gonna then put in all new windows after they
Right.
just bought the biggest thing they'll ever buy. Or, so I'm not sure where the carrot and stick piece comes
But
in.
There is a spot.
it's against the homeowner, because what happens is the buyer comes in and says, oh, there's this energy deficiency, I'll buy it after you fix the windows.
Or take, yeah.
Or,
$15,000.
yeah.
Or give you $15,000 off the price, yeah.
Yeah, and the benefit is far less than what all the expenses are for.
I'd have to
And
disagree
you're
with
not-
you, but
Internally, though,
You're only making a difference of 0.001% on the, if you are worried about climate, truly.
Though if I have a house that has leaky windows, leaky doors, I'm paying more every single solitary month to heat that or to cool that house. And if I'm lucky enough to own a home, which so many of us aren't, but if I'm lucky enough to own a home and I make it better for greenhouse gases, I should be able to get a higher price. If I have a great home energy score, thinking I'm gonna be able to sell my car for, or my house for a little bit more. I think I'm gonna be able to do that. I'm gonna make a little more money. And I think we have to invest to get to be better. And I think, you know, these are things that if I see a gap in my doors or windows, I should be, as a homeowner, I should be fixing that anyway.
And I
But
just
I
like to
think
say to
you
your
have
point,
people who live, look at the people who live in the area we were just talking about, Old Town Lacey. You know, those people bought in committed at a low price, but that's not a high income area in terms of having the extra capital to do a $30,000
do a lot of
window
free
job
work
on
for
your
them down
house,
there.
or, you know, I mean, it seems to me, it seems to punish the seller an awful lot.
But it doesn't have to be a whole like redo all your windows. It might just fix your caulking or something. It may be just something similar, something smaller than that. I don't think it's always gonna be a $30,000.
so Lacey
Keywords are
Lacey
mandated.
wouldn't have been the first city to do this. Fortunately, we've had multiple cities throughout the United States who have done this and have been doing this for a few years. So far, it has not been a hindrance to selling homes. A home energy score, especially in Portland. The only time really the home energy score has ever made a difference to home sellers is when you get in higher income brackets and you're really like, it's like, you know, you're comparing like very similar homes. And so Portland has not found that it's been a hindrance, and they mandate theirs as well, and they have a fine of $500 if you do not get a home energy score. They also subsidize low income, moderate income as well. And it has not been an issue. And in fact, they've actually have about 90% of all homes going for listing that get home energy scores. Half the time, it doesn't really matter to the buyer. Like I said, until you get into higher incomes. And they also we're not talking about mandating the home buyer to do any work before they sell the home. There are some home energy score programs around the country that would require a home buyer or a home seller to do some sort of work if they get a home energy score, but that we're not doing that. It would just be the score. And so it'd be on the buyer if they'd like to take that information and use it. Honestly, most of the time, if you're getting into your home, you're probably gonna have, depending on if you're selling another home or whatnot, what we found is if you have some extra money, you're probably gonna reinvest into energy savings anyways versus new countertops. And that's kind of what we're talking about.
But inspectors wouldn't find much of this stuff anyway, and they're gonna call it out on a house inspection,
Not
aren't they?
necessarily, they're not required to, and that's what a home energy score is. You're required to look at the insulation, at the windows, at the heating element, and use that to base to create a rating for the home, which also includes how much it costs to heat the home throughout the year. So you're really getting, if you're looking at this to use a home, you're also comparing how much you're gonna be, how much is it gonna cost me to own this home and not just my mortgage and my insurance, but to heat this home as well, or to fix a new roof in 10 years, you know, an inspector may find that. They may not find the insulation that's not working, you know, that you're gonna have to change. And so that's kind of what we're talking about as well, the home energy score.
And by the way, I didn't stand up because I'm trying to.
Yeah, that's okay if you are.
My back is
Yeah.
bothering me.
That is okay if you are.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're like, okay. Time to get out of here. No, it's computer, so just like slowly see me start back.
So my understanding is that you can only be eligible for any of the rebates if you go through a contractor who's part of this program. And so aren't we then incentivizing a very specific set of contractors to pick up a lot of this work? Unintentionally, that's not the goal, but
It
You
is
see you're
because
not
they're the
required
ones
to.
that are pushing for this.
I
Like
don't
Simpson
doubt
creating a
it.
law for their product.
Also, what about people
Not
like
all of the
myself
rebates
who
with
do
PSC
home
require
work?
specific contractors.
Yeah, so I'm not eligible to receive it just because I'm the one doing the work, or if I'm purchasing the unit and installing it myself, it's punishing the individual who's not using contractors. Now granted, I don't think most people do their own homework or their own work anymore. But
Well, you know, when we bought our heating system in 2020, the rebates that we got from PSE were on the equipment, not on the installation.
Right.
So.
If you're going through
And a
PSC,
lot
if you're
of-
going
and a
through
lot-
PSC, you can do some of the work yourself. If it's like weatherization and insulation, I think you have to use a preferred contractor.
Right.
But even if you do the work yourself, you can still submit the application for the equipment itself to get the rebate.
And not every rebate is for something that requires installation. You're talking washing machines, dishwashers.
You can submit those yourself
Yeah,
through their
yeah,
application portal and still get the matching rebate and the original rebate.
Yeah, and a couple points, and a great discussion, and again, just kind of like the
Yeah.
housing thing, we got a lot of stuff to figure out,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we're not set on this, so, you know, just stay tuned. Number one, the efficiency boost, so 90% or less of the area median
Mhm.
income, it's based on the household size. And so for a house of one, it's a maximum of $5,381 a month, so that's about $63,000 a year. For a family of four, about it's $76.88 a month, so that's about $100,000 or less, so keep that in mind. When we were looking at our program that is now kind of phasing out is for example, a washer and dryer, basically our program combined with PSEs was allowing for people to get more than half of their appliance paid for through a rebate, which is huge.
Pretty good.
Right, so keep that in mind, that these are pretty significant, that they're not just like, you know, they're not just a drop in the bucket. They're paying for, you know, around half at least of the appliances. And related to the contractors, you know, I think people want to work generally with PSE preferred contractors because a lot of times they're able to purchase things in bulk. And
And
then
they're
also.
cheap companies with hundreds or thousands of employees that go all up and down Washington, and you're effectively funneling money to them instead of your local independent contractors,
There's
is
a lot of
somebody who
local
did this.
contractors
Yeah,
that
I
have
think.
contacted me about
Shoved
the
out.
Yeah, I know,
They made it illegal for me to
PSE
contract
preferred
electrical
contractors as well.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I was running into an issue where LNI was gonna require an electrician to do holiday lighting. So it's like, that was 30% of my business. I would have been out of business. There's no way I could sell that and pay an electrician to come do anything and make it economical. So it's like, I love the intent. I feel like we need to work on how we get there.
Exactly. A mandate and trigger events are the two things that really trigger me. Because that's a brown shirt, jackboot style of coming in and telling you, you will do this, you will own nothing and be happy.
I think we have some opinions. So again, stay tuned. You know, we'll, as this progresses, we'll brief planning commission as it develops. Obviously, it's an ordinance that has to go in front of the city council. The city council is the decision maker when it comes to this.
Yeah.
So, you know, keep that in mind as well. So, more information to come.
So I am absolutely confident that with all of the different opinions and the big brains that are at this table, that we will come up with something. We may not get everything exactly how we want it, but I know this group is gonna come up with something that's a good product. And for that, I'm very appreciative of all of you.
Might take us a while.
I think it's a lot.
That one I'm digging in, I'm sorry.
So, Lizzie, thank you
Yep.
very much.
Thank you.
It's always good to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're really a
Conversation.
great presenter of complex information and a really manageable
great.
pieces.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Even if it's
Good for you on the
trigger.
ground.
I don't like the government coming in and telling you what you will do.
all right. Thank you, Kirian. Thank you for attending long distance. What's the temperature like there today?
We were up in the high 90s, so often.
Yeah.
Speaking of energy efficiency.
Yeah, AC is kicking on.
Got the air on.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call the meeting adjourned. Our next meeting's in 2 weeks. Thank you all very, very much.
Yeah, thank you. I do wanna say,
Oh,
I
yeah.
have